legal theory or legal theory, which of course requires that we need to find another basis, another driving value for considerability, which I will talk about in a minute. But I do want now to say one more thing about the currently favored view that cognition is the 19th and 20th century, at least 18th to 20th century, demon. That is the view that humans, or the ideal human, or the normal human, is rational. And this has been a very fashionable objection for at least the last decade. The view is, that's the problem. If we only get rid of that view that valorizes cognition and accept that human beings are emotional or caring or something else. Just get rid of that and we'll solve all of these problems of exclusion. I do not believe that. I don't believe that in my own experience. And I am now talking about as a person who, from the time I became disabled at the age of 10, understood that I, because of that, had lost protection against the state. And that had nothing to do with whether I could cognize well or not. I have known from the time that I was a young woman, adolescent young woman, that I would have no right to my children if I had children. The state could take them away simply on the basis that I was disabled. Now, these days, if I were still a childbearing age, it would be a lot harder for the state to do that. But it isn't hard for the state to place me in a position of compromised legal personhood, even now. I'll give you the kind of experience that I continue to encounter. About 5 years ago, I got a full right to New Zealand. I was going to be in New Zealand for nearly 6 months. Since I live alone, I had to figure out how I was going to disappear for 6 months. And I did. I also actually had to be in DC the day I got back from New Zealand. So being me, I packed a suitcase for DC. I went to New Zealand. I came back from New Zealand, went from the airport to my house, took the bewildered taxi driver in, dropped my 2 duffel bags in New Zealand, grabbed my other suitcase and said, "Take me back to the airport." And I'm telling you this because what I'm trying to say is I was away out of San Francisco for quite a long time. I prepaid all my bills. I had my mail help. Got back from DC. Also, by the way, she can tell us on Saturday. But my employer did actually know where I was because they had to find me to ask me all the questions like, how do we fill out these forms? So, got back, got a little sleep finally, and I hear knocking on the door. And often I ignore that, but I did go to the door, and I found a social worker and a police person there, waiting to break into my house if I did not answer. It turned out that something I pretty much ignored, there was a new state law that if you were reported as a vulnerable person, if you were reported as not having been seen, that social workers were required, city and county of San Francisco, were required to see you in person. And they had phoned me, my house, didn't answer because I was in Auckland. They had then sent a letter. I didn't get it because my mail was being held in the post office. And having gotten neither of these, and I certainly, when I was home just changing suitcases, I wasn't going to go to the post office and get my mail. It's the last thing I wanted. So, it turned out that had I not happened to have been home on that day, they would have broken into my house. Note, by the way, that if I had been in trouble, I would have been long dead. And it turned out because a nosy neighbor said she's in a wheelchair. that I was vulnerable to this. None of my colleagues who get Fulbrights have to report to anybody where they're going, etc. And this is just another manifestation. It has nothing to do with cognition. It is a deeper notion. And I think we need to get at what that deeper problem is. Because if we pick out surface issues, we're not going to get at what it is that enables the state. Under the rubric, I believe, of duty of care, to not really make decisions, but violate, basically placing people in jeopardy, and this is the big problem. Placing people in jeopardy because very often the state is about, and its instruments are about the last good decision makers. We know this because we know that there's been a very long history of institutionalizing people and then harming them. We wouldn't be here without all of that well-known history of what happens when the state takes people out of control, of their own control, and places them under the control of others. So that's really what I am hoping to get at with the book that Leslie Francis and I are finishing. A book that has been nearly finished for about 18 months, just 2 short chapters. And this is a new theory of justice. It is a social contract theory of justice. And Leslie and I, starting with an article in Ethics in 2005, have argued that social contract theory should be based on trust and on practices that nourish trust. And in fact, my standard for this, in using this kind of social contract theory. So rather than the notion of bargaining, where rational people bargain with each other about what they'll accept of the state, the idea is that the kind of interaction that you are attempting, that you base your social contract theory on, is the kind of interaction that promotes trust. My standard for this is Eva's daughter Session, because Session, although she is not verbal, certainly trusts some people and sure doesn't trust others. And from what everything Eva tells me, she trusts and distrusts rationally. She distrusts those who should be distrusted because of her interaction. So I was looking for something very fundamental that people about interaction, not only between humans, but among other kinds of entities, humans and other kinds of entities as well. And we will eventually finish this book. Finally, I did want to, well, let me say one more thing. I'm really not good counting, but I think I'm so moving pretty fast. So a good chunk of the paper that I gave you today comes from an idea that is mine originally, and it's the idea of prosthetic cognition. And I would like you to take a look at it. It's been published, I think, twice now. One in Eva's English's book, and I know I published it somewhere else for other parts. I'm still trying to develop it. So, prosthetic is not supportive decision making. I presume that many, many, many different kinds of people have intellectual strengths and intellectual weaknesses. Many of the people I know who are labeled as having intellectual disabilities can do some kinds of things intellectually much better than I can.